Josh Gates was once the face of adventure television, the archaeologist turned explorer who made discovering the world's mysteries look effortless. From jungles to temples, from lost civilizations to legendary creatures, Gates inspired millions. With his wit, curiosity, and enthusiasm, he became the modern Indiana Jones. But behind the camera-ready smile, Josh Gates's life has unraveled into tragedy. Devastating health crises from relentless travel, a marriage that crumbled under constant absence, near-death experiences leaving permanent scars, professional betrayals destroying friendship, accusations shattering his credibility. This is the heartbreaking story of a man who traveled the entire world only to lose himself completely. The tragic downfall of Josh Gates. In the mid-2000s, Josh Gates emerged as something fresh in adventure television. Born in Massachusetts in 1977, he studied archaeology and drama at Tufts University. His big break came in 2007 with Destination Truth on Sci-Fi Channel. The concept was simple: travel to remote locations investigating cryptids and paranormal phenomena. But Gates made it special with genuine knowledge, self-deprecating humor, and willingness to look foolish on camera. The show ran 5 seasons, building a devoted following. Fans loved his energy and curiosity. Josh Gates was living the dream millions wish they could live, exploring the world, getting paid for it, becoming famous. But dreams often come with hidden costs. By 2015, Josh Gates reached his career peak. Expedition Unknown premiered on Travel Channel with bigger budgets and better production. Instead of chasing monsters, Gates investigated historical mysteries, lost treasures, ancient civilizations, unsolved disappearances. His archaeology degree gave him credibility. His television experience made him engaging. His natural charisma made viewers trust him. Expedition Unknown became Travel Channel's flagship series, drawing millions of viewers. Gates appeared on talk shows, became a household name. At industry events, he was treated like royalty. Nobody could replicate his perfect blend of knowledge, humor, and passion. For a brief moment, Josh Gates seemed invincible, the adventure hero who could do no wrong. But the higher the peak, the deeper the fall. What viewers saw was adventure. What they didn't see was brutal physical toll. Josh Gates spent 250 days per year traveling, 8 to 9 months annually away from home, filming in remote, dangerous, uncomfortable locations. Over 100 countries across all 7 continents. Each location presented health risks, and Gates experienced them all. In 2011, while filming in Papua New Guinea, he contracted severe malaria that nearly killed him. Weeks hospitalized, delirious with fever. Even after recovery, recurring symptoms plagued him for years. Chronic gastrointestinal problems from contaminated food and water, parasitic infections requiring aggressive treatment, dental emergencies from lack of care, constant jet lag destroyed his sleep, leading to chronic insomnia. Gates rarely slept more than 4 hours nightly. The exhaustion was crushing. Physical injuries were worse. In 2016, filming in Peru, Gates suffered serious back injury, a slipped disc sending shooting pain down his legs. He kept filming anyway. Months of physical therapy followed. Even today, he lives with chronic pain that won't heal. A year later, exploring unstable caves, he fractured his ankle. Again, he continued filming. His body was breaking down faster than it could repair. Repeated altitude sickness at extreme elevations caused permanent cardiovascular damage. By his early 40s, medical exams revealed his heart showed wear patterns of someone 20 years older. The adventure lifestyle was literally destroying his body from inside out. But he couldn't stop. The show was his identity. Without it, who was he? While destroying his body chasing adventures, his personal life quietly fell apart. In 2014, he married Hallie Nadovich, a therapist who worked on Destination Truth. They had met while filming. Their relationship seemed like genuine love. Son Owen was born in 2016, daughter Isla in 2018. Gates spoke constantly about his family, calling them his anchor. But reality was darker. He was home perhaps 3 months yearly. Hallie essentially raised 2 children alone. Gates missed birthdays, first steps, first words. All the tiny moments that make up childhood, he wasn't there. When home, he was recovering or preparing for next expedition. Friends reported Hallie begged him to slow down, choose family over career. But Gates couldn't. The call of adventure was too strong. In 2021, the inevitable happened. Josh and Hallie quietly separated. The announcement came through brief social media statement. A year later, divorce was finalized. Custody meant Gates would see his children even less. Scheduled visits, weekends when not filming. In a 2023 interview, Gates opened up about the failure. Voice-breaking, he admitted making a choice. Career over family, adventure over home, fame over people who loved him most. Hallie had given countless chances to change, to prioritize family. Every time he chose the next expedition, she couldn't compete with his obsession. Eventually, she stopped trying. The divorce devastated Gates. It forced him to confront truth. He'd traveled the world, discovered ancient civilizations, but lost the only thing that truly mattered: his family, his home. And that loss was permanent. Josh Gates faced multiple brushes, with death leaving permanent scars. In 2017, filming in Egypt, Gates and crew explored an ancient tomb when structure collapsed. Tons of debris trapped them underground in darkness. For 4 hours they waited, oxygen growing thin, dust choking lungs. Gates believed with certainty he would die there, eventually rescued, but psychological damage was done. He developed severe PTSD and claustrophobia, panic attacks in confined spaces. For an explorer investigating caves and tombs regularly, this was catastrophic. 2 years later came another near-death experience. Deep in the Amazon, Gates participated in an indigenous ceremony involving plant medicine. He suffered severe allergic reaction, cardiovascular collapse, heart rate dangerously irregular. Emergency helicopter evacuation saved his life. 2 weeks hospitalized. Doctors said he came within hours of death, left with permanent heart arrhythmia requiring daily medication. The most damaging incident came in 2020, filming in the Himalayas. Searching for Yeti evidence, Gates lost footing on ice-covered slope, fell 30 feet down mountainside. Injuries were severe. Multiple fractured ribs, serious concussion, massive bruising. Worst damage was left arm. Nerve damage never fully healed, leaving permanent reduced sensation and chronic pain. Even today, Gates cannot fully use his left hand. These near-death experiences transformed him. The fearless explorer died in those moments. What emerged was haunted. In interviews after, you see the change. Easy confidence gone. Quick smile doesn't reach eyes. He speaks about mortality, fragility of life, moments believing he'd never see children again. Psychological scars combined with PTSD created someone constantly waiting for next disaster. Joy had gone from exploration. What remained was fear, pain, and realization. His body couldn't sustain this much longer. As Gates struggled personally, his professional life fractured. In 2020, shows transitioned from Travel Channel to Discovery Plus. Behind scenes, bitter contract disputes, accusations of broken promises. Gates was assured larger budgets, creative control, theatrical releases. Instead, content was buried on streaming with minimal promotion. Viewership plummeted. Gates felt betrayed by executives. Worse were personal betrayals. In 2021, former crew leaked behind-the-scenes footage showing different Josh Gates. Videos showed him berating staff, making unreasonable demands, creating hostile work environment. Multiple crew members came forward. Stories of verbal abuse, favoritism, taking credit for others' work. Gates issued apology, but damage was done. Image of friendly explorer shattered, replaced by someone who under pressure revealed darker personality. Industry insiders described him as territorial, difficult, someone using power to eliminate competition. Professional conflicts extended beyond his crew. Public falling outs with other television hosts. One accused Gates of blocking their show from being greenlit. Another claimed Gates stole investigation techniques. Industry insiders described him as territorial, someone seeing other shows as competition to eliminate. Once seen as friendly face of adventure TV, now viewed as someone who'd use power to protect his empire. Even longtime friendships fractured. People who worked since Destination Truth days found themselves pushed out. When they tried maintaining relationships, Gates was distant, unavailable. The isolation became complete. Professionally, Gates burned bridges throughout industry. Former allies wanted nothing to do with him. His reputation shifted from beloved explorer to difficult and toxic. In tight-knit adventure television world, that reputation spread quickly. By 2023, increasingly alone, not just personally, but professionally. The network he'd built over decades crumbled. If professional betrayals were painful, accusations about his work were devastating. In 2022, whistleblower came forward with explosive claims. Certain discoveries on Expedition Unknown had been staged. Artifacts shown being unearthed were planted by crew hours before filming. Specific accusation, ancient coins episode. Whistleblower claimed coins were purchased and deliberately placed for dramatic television moment. Gates denied allegations but couldn't provide proof of authenticity. More accusations followed. Researchers examined episodes, pointing out inconsistencies. Professional archaeologists began distancing themselves. Some publicly criticized him for prioritizing entertainment over scientific accuracy. Academic institutions previously welcoming Gates now refused participation. His credibility, foundation of entire career, was under serious attack. YouTube channels debunking episodes gained millions of views. Former fans felt betrayed. Social media became toxic. Gates deleting comments and and blocking critics made things worse. Credibility crisis went beyond staged discoveries. Critics questioned Gates's archaeological credentials themselves. Yes, he had Tufts degree, but had he ever practiced archaeology professionally before television? Answer was no. Entire career in entertainment. Never worked real excavation outside filming. Never published academic papers. Never contributed to archaeological knowledge meaningfully. This revelation hit hard. Gates built reputation on being archaeologist turned television host. Reality was someone with archaeology degree going straight into entertainment. The distinction mattered. His authority was based on performance, not genuine expertise. Once viewers understood, they saw shows differently. Not authentic explorations, but entertainment loosely based on real history. Impact on legacy was profound. 2 decades building reputation as someone bringing real exploration to television. Now, that legacy was tainted. No longer invited to speak at universities. Not asked to participate in conferences. Respect from professional community evaporated. By 2023, cumulative weight became too much. Health problems, divorce, near-death experiences, professional controversies, attacks on credibility. Josh Gates reached breaking point. Unprecedented for his reliability, Gates suddenly canceled multiple filming commitments. Productions scheduled for months put on hold. Crew sent home. Something was very wrong. News leaked. Gates checked into private mental health facility, diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety disorder. According to people close, he'd become suicidal. The pressure, guilt, pain pushed him to see ending his life as only way out. 6 weeks intensive treatment, completely off social media, unreachable. When he emerged, visibly changed. Energy was gone. Looked older, tired, defeated. In raw emotional interview, Gates opened up about mental health crisis, PTSD from near-death experiences, nightmares of collapsed tombs and falling mountains, panic attacks without warning, crushing guilt over missing children's lives while chasing fame. Gates confessed to serious alcohol problem during darkest period, using drinking to cope with stress, pain, overwhelming failure. Started as wine to help sleep despite chronic insomnia. It escalated, soon drinking heavily every night, on location, between filming, alone in hotel rooms where nobody knew him. Alcohol provided temporary escape from unbearable thoughts. He spoke about contemplating suicide, times when pain felt so overwhelming that ending it seemed rational. Standing in hotel rooms, looking out windows, seriously considering jumping, having detailed plans. Only thing stopping him was thinking about his children. Idea they'd grow up knowing father killed himself, that they'd blame themselves. That tiny thread of connection, though he barely saw them, kept him alive. The interview was devastating. Not the Josh Gates millions knew. Not confident explorer with quick joke. A broken man, barely holding together, speaking about desire to die. Treatment helped him survive, pulled back from edge, but didn't fix him. Depression remained. Anxiety persisted. As Gates struggled with mental health, his career began final collapse. By 2024, numbers were undeniable. Expedition Unknown viewership dropped 60% from peak. Discovery Plus began cutting budgets. Fewer international locations, smaller crews, cheaper production. Show once spanning globe, now filming closer to home with reduced quality. Expedition X spinoff was quietly canceled. Other projects shelved. Network executives stopped returning calls. Message clear. Josh Gates no longer the draw he once was. Industry rumors painted him as difficult, unreliable after mental health crisis. Perception he couldn't be counted on. Lost hosting gigs for special events, passed over for new shows, financial impact severe, divorce settlement and child support drained savings. Medical bills accumulated, reduced income meant Gates couldn't maintain lifestyle. Forced to sell Los Angeles home, move to smaller property. Man who traveled first class now flew economy. Reports of Gates at fan conventions doing paid meet and greets felt desperate. Desperate to remain relevant. Gates attempted reinvention. Started podcast featuring exploration stories and interviews. Never gained traction. Critics accused recycling old stories, offering nothing new. Audience numbers disappointing. Attempted YouTube channel but faced stiff competition. Younger creators producing content with production values rivaling television. Channel struggled gaining subscribers. Videos received modest views. Comment sections filled with criticism rather than adoration. He pitched new television concepts to networks, different formats, different approaches. Network after network passed. They didn't see value. Adventure documentary space was crowded. Gates no longer had draw to stand out. Repeated rejections, humiliating isolating for someone once courted by competing networks. Friends described him as increasingly bitter and resentful, complaining about younger hosts, less qualified, less deserving, blamed networks for not supporting him, blamed changing tastes, blamed everyone except himself. Josh Gates, once known for humility, became someone consumed by bitterness. As career collapsed, Gates found himself increasingly isolated. Early Destination Truth crew no longer spoke to him. Years of difficult behavior, controversies, leaked footage burned those bridges. When Gates reached out, messages went unanswered. At industry events, people avoided him. Professional relationships throughout television deteriorated. Producers saw him as toxic. Executives viewed him as liability. Even other adventure hosts kept distance. Reputation as difficult, unreliable, past prime became impossible to escape. But most heartbreaking isolation was from his own children. Custody meant seeing them few times monthly, brief visits feeling strained and awkward. Years of absence created unbridgeable gap. His son and daughter barely knew him. To them, essentially a stranger occasionally appearing, trying too hard to connect. Gates admitted children felt like strangers to him. He'd missed so much. He didn't know who they were, their interests, personalities, daily routines, all foreign. He was tourist in their lives, allowed brief visits but never truly belonging. Even remaining personal friendships withered. People exhausted by his negativity and bitterness, put off by drinking, which, despite treatment, remained problem. Simply didn't know how to help someone pushing everyone away. Social media, once connecting warmly with fans, became minefield. Posts received more criticism than support. When sharing anything personal, he was attacked. When promoting work, people reminded him of controversies, eventually posted less frequently. By 2025, Josh Gates existed in profound loneliness he'd created. Lived alone in modest home, no partner, no close friends checking in regularly, minimal contact with children. Man who traveled every corner of Earth, met thousands, been surrounded by crews and fans, was utterly alone. Recent photographs show change starkly. Gone is vibrant explorer. In his place, man looking older than years. Worn by health problems, trauma, regret. Ready smile now looks forced. Painted for camera, but never reaching eyes. Not the Josh Gates millions love. This is what remains after everything stripped away. Broken man living with consequences of choices he can never undo. Looking at Josh Gates today, picture is undeniably tragic. He still technically has show. Expedition Unknown continues limping along with drastically reduced viewership and budget, but feels like ghost of what it was. Gates going through motions, lacking passion and energy that once made work compelling. Health continues deteriorating. Chronic pain persists. Heart arrhythmia requires constant management. Mental health struggles remain ongoing battle. Career effectively over. Opportunities dried up. Public moved on to newer faces. Few projects remind people how far he's fallen. Financially nowhere near stability once enjoyed. Most tragic is permanent damage to relationship with children. Those early years missed are gone forever. Foundation built through daily presence, he forfeited that. While he may have visitation rights, he's lost being their dad meaningfully. Josh Gates once said, "Adventure is worthwhile in itself, that pursuing unknown justifies any sacrifice." Today, those words echo with bitter irony. He discovered what lay at pursuit's end. Not treasure or glory. Loss of health, loss of family, loss of credibility, loss of himself. He explored entire world but lost his way home. The tragic downfall of Josh Gates is complete. Jessica Chobot didn't disappear from Expedition X with an announcement or a goodbye. One season she was there, steady, fearless, asking the questions viewers trusted. Then suddenly, she was gone. No explanation, no farewell episode, just silence. Officially, it was a creative shift, but people who worked behind the scenes say that story doesn't come close to the truth, because Jessica wasn't just a host. She was the one slowing things down when the danger escalated. The one questioning edits that didn't match what really happened in the field, and the one who reportedly pushed back when investigations crossed a line from discovery into risk for spectacle. Tonight, we're unpacking what led to her quiet exit, the investigation that changed everything, and why some footage may never be seen. If you value stories that go deeper than the surface narrative, hit subscribe now, because what happened here wasn't just a departure, it was a warning. Before her departure became a quiet mystery, Jessica Chobot was the emotional and intellectual anchor of Expedition X. She wasn't just a host reacting to strange locations or unexplained events. She was the connective tissue between the investigation and the audience. While others focused on instruments and theories, Jessica focused on context, human impact, and what the evidence actually meant. That balance is what made viewers trust her. From the earliest episodes, crew members noticed something different about how she worked. When cameras stopped rolling, she didn't disappear to reset for the next scene. She stayed. She reviewed audio logs, rewatched thermal footage, and asked for raw data instead of highlight reels. According to multiple people who worked in production, Jessica was the only on-camera talent who regularly requested access to uncut material after investigations wrapped. Not because she wanted more screen time, but because she wanted to understand what really happened. Her background mattered here. Jessica came into Expedition X with years of experience in investigative media, not just paranormal entertainment. She understood how easily a narrative could drift away from facts once editing began. That awareness made her cautious in ways others weren't. She often questioned whether a reaction shot truly reflected the moment it was attached to, or whether an equipment malfunction was being framed too mysteriously for what it actually was. This didn't make her difficult. It made her precise. Crew members have said she rarely raised her voice or caused confrontation. Instead, she asked quiet, uncomfortable questions. Why did this cut remove the evacuation discussion? Why wasn't this safety concern mentioned on camera? Why does this moment feel bigger in the edit than it felt in real time? As the show gained popularity, those questions became more frequent and more inconvenient. Jessica believed the strength of Expedition X wasn't fear, but credibility. She wanted the audience to feel uncertainty without manipulation, tension without exaggeration. That philosophy shaped her on-screen presence. Calm, grounded, observant. She didn't need to dramatize the unknown. She respected it. But that same commitment began to place her at odds with the direction the show was quietly moving toward. Because as ratings grew, so did the pressure to escalate. And Jessica was standing directly in the way of that escalation. What started as dedication would soon be viewed as resistance. And that resistance, whether she realized it or not, was already putting her on the outside. As Expedition X grew in popularity, the tone of the series began to shift in subtle but important ways. What had started as a careful investigation-first program slowly leaned toward faster pacing, higher stakes, and moments designed to feel more intense on screen. To most viewers, the change was almost invisible, but behind the scenes, it was impossible to miss. Production meetings increasingly focused on energy, impact, and payoff. Episodes needed stronger hooks and more dramatic beats to compete in a crowded paranormal television landscape. According to multiple crew accounts, she was one of the first to question whether the show was drifting away from its original purpose. She didn't object to tension or suspense. What bothered her was when the narrative began to move faster than the evidence. In meetings, she reportedly asked whether certain moments were being emphasized because they were meaningful or because they played better on camera. Those questions didn't always land well. Jessica noticed that reaction shots were sometimes prioritized over analysis, and that equipment anomalies were framed more ominously in post-production than they felt in the field. Nothing was fabricated outright, but the tone was being sharpened. Uncertainty was being nudged toward implication. She pushed back quietly at first, asking for context to be added, requesting that disclaimers stay in place, suggesting that viewers deserved to know when something was unresolved rather than hinted at as definitive. To her, ambiguity wasn't a weakness, it was honesty. Field operations changed too. Investigations were occasionally extended longer than planned, not because new data was coming in, but because the episode still needed a climax. Crew members later said Jessica was often the one checking safety protocols repeatedly, confirming exit plans, and questioning why they were staying when conditions were deteriorating. One technician recalled her asking a simple question during a late-night shoot: "If nothing else happens tonight, are we okay with that?" The silence that followed told her everything. Behind the scenes, her insistence on restraint began to stand out. She wasn't refusing to investigate. She was refusing to exaggerate. And in a production environment increasingly shaped by ratings pressure, that distinction mattered. What once made Jessica invaluable, her commitment to accuracy and caution, was slowly being reframed as hesitation, as friction, as someone not fully aligned with where the show was heading. And that tension would soon stop being theoretical, because one investigation would force everything into the open and make it impossible for her to keep going as if nothing had changed. According to multiple people close to production, the moment everything changed for Jessica Chobot happened during an investigation that never aired in its original original form. On paper, it was a standard assignment. A remote site with reports of unexplained activity, environmental instability, and electromagnetic interference. The kind of location Expedition X had handled before. But this time, the risks weren't theoretical. From the start, Jessica expressed concerns about the environment itself. Structural instability, unreliable communications, and a lack of clear emergency access made the location unusually dangerous. She flagged the site as high risk and requested additional safeguards before filming continued. Those requests were acknowledged and then quietly deprioritized. The pressure to proceed came down to one thing. The episode needed something to happen. As the team moved deeper into the investigation, equipment began behaving erratically. Readings spiked without explanation. Audio feeds dropped in and out. Crew members later described sudden dizziness, disorientation, and a strange sensation of pressure that none of them could easily explain. While these moments were unsettling, what disturbed Jessica most was how quickly they were reframed as atmosphere rather than warning signs. At one point, a piece of equipment failed in a way that caused a brief but serious safety incident. No one was badly hurt, but it was close enough to leave an impression. Jessica was reportedly the first to call for a pause, insisting they stop and assess before continuing. Cameras were still rolling. Later that night, she reviewed the raw footage alone. What she saw didn't match how the incident was being discussed. Thermal anomalies appeared in the same moments the equipment failed. Audio distortions coincided with physical effects on the crew. Whether it was environmental, technical, or something unknown didn't matter. What mattered was that it wasn't being treated with the seriousness it deserved. The next morning, Jessica confronted production leadership. She didn't accuse anyone of wrongdoing. She asked a direct question instead. Were they documenting what happened or reshaping it into something more dramatic than truthful? The response, according to insiders, was carefully neutral. The episode would be edited responsibly. Safety would be addressed internally. The narrative would be adjusted. That answer didn't reassure her. It confirmed her fear. For the first time, Jessica realized the issue wasn't a single investigation. It was the system deciding which parts of reality were convenient enough to show. And in that moment, she understood something else too. If she stayed, she would eventually be asked to stand in front of the camera and support a version of events she didn't believe in. And that was a line she wasn't willing to cross. After the investigation that raised serious alarms for Jessica Chobot, she expected a period of reflection, a review of what went wrong, how close the crew had come to real danger, and whether the episode should even move forward. Instead, what followed was something far more unsettling. When the first rough cuts began circulating, Jessica noticed immediately that key moments were missing. The pauses she had called for, the discussions about evacuation, the uncertainty in the data, all of it had been trimmed or reframed. What remained was a cleaner, more dramatic version of events, one that suggested tension without fully acknowledging risk. According to one post-production staffer, entire segments where Jessica questioned whether they should continue filming were marked as non-essential. Audio clips documenting crew discomfort were shortened. The equipment failure was labeled as a minor malfunction rather than a warning sign. The episode still worked as television, but it no longer worked as truth. Jessica didn't confront anyone emotionally. She went to the editing room and asked for the cut logs. When she reviewed them, she noticed something disturbing. Certain clips had been flagged for removal before the full debrief even took place. That meant decisions about what not to show were being made before the investigation had been properly analyzed. She raised this in a production call, asking why moments related to safety and uncertainty were being softened. The answer she received was careful, corporate, and revealing. Those elements were too alarming for the tone of the series. They could create unnecessary fear or imply liability. To Jessica, that reasoning missed the point entirely. If something was alarming, it deserved context, not concealment. If an investigation pushed people into danger, viewers had a right to know. Her analytical segments were shortened. More narration was shifted elsewhere. On screen, nothing appeared wrong. Off screen, she felt herself being managed. Crew members noticed it too. One assistant editor later said it felt like Jessica was being protected from herself, shielded from having too much influence over the final story. Not because she was wrong, but because she was inconvenient. This wasn't censorship in the obvious sense. It was filtration. Reality passed through a lens designed to preserve tone rather than truth. For Jessica, that realization was heavier than fear of the unknown. She could accept unanswered questions. What she couldn't accept was pretending certainty where none existed, or glossing over risk for the sake of a cleaner episode. And once she saw how easily reality could be reshaped in post-production, she knew the problem wasn't going to fix itself. The show wasn't just documenting documenting the unexplained anymore. It was managing it. That understanding quietly pushed her closer to a decision she hadn't yet spoken out loud, but was already forming. In the weeks following the disputed edit, Jessica Chobot's concerns shifted from storytelling to something more serious: crew safety. What had once felt like occasional risk began to look like a pattern: longer shoots in unstable locations, fewer buffers built into filming schedules, decisions increasingly justified by how well a moment might land with the audience. Jessica started asking different questions, not about ratings or pacing, but about response times, about backup plans, about what would happen if someone got hurt in a place emergency services couldn't reach quickly. According to a crew medic, she once asked bluntly how many minutes it would take to extract an injured team member from a remote site if something collapsed. When she heard the answer, she reportedly fell silent. Production leadership didn't ignore her outright, but her concerns were framed as caution bordering on overreaction. After all, nothing catastrophic had happened yet. The show had always pushed into difficult environments. That was part of its identity. Jessica disagreed. She believed that survival so far didn't justify increasing risk. During planning sessions for future investigations, she began flagging sites as unacceptable unless additional safeguards were added: extra personnel, redundant communications, more conservative access limits. These requests were often met with budget constraints and time pressure. The message was clear, even if it was never stated directly. The show needed to stay agile. One meeting in particular stuck with her. A producer reportedly described a high-risk location as worth it if something finally breaks open. Jessica responded quietly, asking whether something breaking open included people. The room went still. After that, her role subtly changed. She was still respected, still on camera, but increasingly excluded from early planning conversations. Decisions were being made before she entered the room. By the time she raised concerns, the logistics were already locked in. Crew members later said it felt like two priorities were colliding. One side focused on discovery and responsibility, the other focused on momentum. What made this moment critical was that Jessica wasn't asking to stop investigating. She was asking to slow down when the line between exploration and danger blurred. To her, the unknown deserved respect, not pressure. Privately, she began confiding in a small number of colleagues that she felt the show was approaching a breaking point, not because of what they might find, but because of how far they were willing to go looking for it. That tension wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, professional, controlled, and that's what made it so dangerous. Because once safety becomes negotiable, the decision to step away stops being emotional. It becomes inevitable. The moment Jessica Chobot realized she couldn't continue didn't happen during a dramatic confrontation or a dangerous incident in the field. It happened in a conference room. During a routine production briefing for an upcoming investigation, logistics were being finalized for a remote location with known structural instability. Jessica had already reviewed the latest environmental assessments and flagged the area as high risk. She recommended additional personnel and stricter limits on how far the team should go once inside. The response she received wasn't hostile. It was procedural. The budget wouldn't allow it. The schedule couldn't support delays. The team would adapt as needed. Then someone said it. The investigation needed proximity. The episode needed stakes. Jessica didn't argue. She listened, and in that moment, she understood that the calculation had shifted. Risk was no longer something to be minimized. It was something being weighed against entertainment value. Later that evening, she returned to her hotel and began organizing her notes. Not dramatically, methodically. Field journals, emails, planning documents. She drafted a message requesting a pause in filming until safety standards and narrative boundaries could be reviewed. When the response came back, it was polite and firm. The show was moving forward. That was enough. Jessica didn't walk away out of fear or frustration. She walked away because staying would mean accepting a system where caution was treated as an obstacle. She wasn't willing to be the face of something she couldn't stand behind. 2 days later, she made the call. She would step back from filming. No public conflict, no accusations, just a line drawn quietly and permanently. And with that decision, Expedition X lost more than a host. It lost the person who had been asking whether the mission was still worth the cost. Jessica Chobot's departure didn't create chaos overnight. It created silence. On the surface, Expedition X continued. Episodes aired, investigations moved forward. Viewers were told it was a normal transition. But behind the scenes, crew members say the atmosphere shifted immediately. immediately. Meetings grew shorter. Safety discussions became streamlined instead of thorough. Decisions that once involved debate now moved quickly, often without pushback. Several longtime staff noticed that the questions Jessica used to ask were no longer being asked at all. Why are we pushing deeper? What happens if this goes wrong? Are we documenting something real or framing something dramatic? Without her in the room, those pauses disappeared. Not because the answers had improved, but because no one was pressing for them anymore. Editors later admitted that the tone of episodes subtly changed. More emphasis on reactions, less on uncertainty. Moments that would have once been framed as inconclusive were now allowed to sit closer to implication. Nothing fabricated, just a shift in balance. One crew member described it this way: before, we were investigating first and filming second. After she left, we were filming first and justifying it later. Jessica didn't publicly criticize the show. She didn't hint at wrongdoing. But people noticed that when asked about Expedition X in interviews, she spoke carefully. She praised the team, she respected the work, but she never spoke about the investigations the way she once had. Privately, she stayed in touch with certain crew members. When asked if she regretted leaving, her answer was always the same. "I miss the mission," she said. "I don't miss what it was becoming." Her absence didn't expose a scandal. It revealed a vacuum, and in that vacuum, the show kept going, just without the voice that had been slowing it down before it crossed the line. After stepping away, Jessica Chobot never released a tell-all. There was no expose, no podcast tour, no dramatic reveal, but people close to her say the most important things she discovered were never meant to become public footage anyway. During her final seasons, Jessica began privately documenting moments that didn't make it into episodes, not because they were unbelievable, but because they were uncomfortable. Times when the data didn't match the narrative, when equipment failures were ordinary, but later framed as something more, when fear was amplified not by the unknown, but by editing choices. She believes some mysteries lose meaning the moment they're pushed too hard. One former field researcher said Jessica kept a separate notebook during investigations, not for theories, but for boundary, places where she felt continuing would cross from exploration into provocation. She rarely spoke about it openly, but she made quiet notes when she felt the team was pressing an environment too aggressively, or when local warnings were treated as atmosphere rather than information. There was one investigation she reportedly refused to reshoot segments for, not because something terrifying happened, but because nothing happened at all. The readings were flat, the environment was stable, and she felt recreating tension would be dishonest. That footage was eventually reshaped without her involvement. That moment stuck with her. Jessica wasn't afraid of the unknown. She was wary of certainty, of pretending to understand things that might never offer clean answers. To her, the real danger wasn't what lurked in the dark. It was what happens when curiosity becomes entitlement. After leaving, she told a colleague something that never aired anywhere. Some places don't need to be solved. They need to be respected. What she refused to put on camera wasn't evidence. It was the moment when exploration turns into intrusion. And once she felt that line had blurred, she knew stepping away was the only honest choice left. Jessica Chobot didn't leave Expedition X with accusations or controversy. She left with restraint, and that restraint is exactly why her departure still echoes through the show today. In an industry driven by escalation, walking away quietly is often more disruptive than making noise. Jessica didn't expose secrets. She didn't leak footage. She simply removed herself from a process she no longer believed could stay honest. That choice forced an uncomfortable question, not just for the show, but for the entire genre. How far should investigation go before it stops being investigation? Since her exit, paranormal television has continued to grow louder, faster, and more extreme, higher stake, bigger claim, less patience for uncertainty. In that environment, Jessica's absence feels deliberate, almost instructional. She showed that credibility isn't built by chasing answers at any cost. It's built by knowing when to stop asking. Crew members who worked with her still reference the Jessica check, a phrase used informally when discussing risk or narrative framing. It means asking whether a moment is being shown because it matters, or because it plays well on screen. Even now, her influence lingers in the margins. Jessica never said the show crossed a dangerous line, but she didn't have to. Her decision did the talking. When viewers ask why she left, the answer isn't hidden footage or paranormal terror. It's something far more unsettling. She saw where the road was heading, and she chose not to walk it. That's why her exit wasn't an ending. It was a warning, and the fact that it was delivered in silence may be the most honest thing she ever did on camera. Josh Gates just walked away from Expedition X. No warning, no explanation to fans, just a cryptic statement about prioritizing his safety and his family. And now rumors are circulating about what might have happened during their most recent filming expedition. Reports of an incident involving a Bigfoot-like creature in the Pacific Northwest, claims that something left the most fearless explorer on television genuinely shaken. Now let's be clear, nothing is confirmed at this moment. Discovery hasn't released official details. The crew is staying silent, but alleged insider sources have been sharing details that, if true, would explain everything. Subscribe and hit the bell because we're breaking down every rumor, alleged detail, and claimed insider account about what may have happened during that expedition. According to circulating rumors, it happened 3 weeks ago during what was supposed to be a standard Expedition X investigation. The team was allegedly filming in a remote area of Washington state, following up on recent Bigfoot sightings reported by local forestry workers. Multiple witnesses, consistent descriptions, fresh footprints documented by credible sources. Exactly the kind of case Josh has built his career investigating. Claims suggest the team consisted of Josh, his co-host Jessica Chobot, Phil Torres, and a production crew of 8 people. They'd reportedly set up base camp in a valley known for decades of Sasquatch activity. By all alleged accounts, the first 2 days were productive but unremarkable. Footprints supposedly found and documented, strange vocalizations allegedly recorded at distance. Then came the third night. According to unverified sources, Josh and Phil decided to investigate an area about 2 miles from base camp where thermal drones had allegedly detected heat signatures. Jessica reportedly stayed behind to monitor equipment. The plan was supposedly simple: hike in, document whatever they found, return by midnight. Rumor has it they never made it to midnight. At 10:47 p.m., base camp allegedly received a frantic radio transmission from Josh. The audio was reportedly chaotic. Claims suggest certain words came through: contact, close, moving fast, Phil's injured. Then the transmission allegedly cut to static. When communication supposedly resumed, Josh's voice was different, shaken, urgent, allegedly calling for immediate evacuation. According to these reports, the production coordinator sent the entire crew to extract Josh and Phil. What they allegedly found was equipment scattered, Phil on the ground with what's claimed to be a head wound, and Josh standing guard, reportedly refusing to move until the entire group was together. But here's where the rumors get interesting. The cameras were allegedly still rolling. Everything that supposedly happened was reportedly captured on multiple devices. And what those cameras allegedly captured, according to anonymous sources claiming to have seen footage, would be the most compelling Bigfoot evidence ever recorded, if true, if any of this actually happened. And these rumors suggest Josh Gates, a man who's spent 2 decades exploring over 100 countries, investigating everything from lost treasures to paranormal phenomena, decided he's done. Not with television, not with exploration, but allegedly with putting himself in situations where he might encounter something like what was reportedly in those woods, because according to these unconfirmed claims, whatever he supposedly saw wasn't a mystery to be solved. It was a threat to be survived. We need to be clear, we haven't seen this footage ourselves. Discovery allegedly has it locked down tight, but we've heard from sources claiming to have viewed it, and their descriptions, if accurate, are disturbing. What follows is based on those unconfirmed accounts. The footage allegedly begins normally, Josh and Phil hiking through dense forest at night. Standard narration, Phil supposedly scanning with thermal imaging. Around the 18-minute mark, Phil allegedly gets a thermal hit, something large, approximately 400 yards ahead. They reportedly discuss approaching, and Josh makes the decision to close the gap carefully. As they allegedly get closer, the thermal signature supposedly becomes clearer, upright, bipedal. At approximately 200 yards, sources claim the figure stops and turns toward them, not slowly, but deliberately. Phil allegedly says, "I think it knows we're here." Josh's rumored response, "Good, let's see if it'll show itself." This is allegedly when things go wrong. Instead of fleeing, the thermal signature reportedly begins approaching them, fast. Sources describe the speed as terrifying given the dense terrain. Josh supposedly makes the call to back out immediately. They start retreating, but the figure allegedly keeps gaining ground. Then comes what sources describe as a vocalization, allegedly loud, complex, and close. Both men visibly react according to claims, stopping their retreat. In those seconds, the gap supposedly closes to within 50 yards. Then, according to reports, an object flies past Josh's head. A rock, later identified as approximately softball-sized, allegedly impacts a tree with enough force to embed in the bark. Both men allegedly go to ground, and sources claim that with cameras at ground level, they capture something. All 3 sources describe this the same way, if their accounts are true. Clear footage for approximately 4 to 5 seconds, not thermal. Direct view, illuminated by camera lights, of something large, covered in reddish-brown hair, with a face showing features that allegedly don't match any known primate, and eyes that supposedly reflect the camera light. The figure then allegedly moves laterally, circling their position. Phil supposedly tries to track it with thermal. Josh is reportedly reaching for rocks. The circling continues for 30-40 seconds according to claims. Then another rock, allegedly larger, comes from a different direction. It reportedly strikes Phil on the side of the head, dropping him immediately. Josh allegedly goes to Phil and makes the radio call for help, while the thermal camera supposedly still shows that massive heat signature maintaining position, watching them. The standoff allegedly continues for nearly 2 minutes before the figure moves away, but thermal signatures reportedly remain at the edge of detection range, as if it was watching to ensure they left. Phil Torres required immediate medical attention. The rock that struck him left a laceration that needed 12 stitches and caused a concussion significant enough that he was hospitalized overnight for observation. But it's not the severity of the injury that's remarkable, it's the circumstances and the projectile itself. The rock was recovered from the scene, a smooth river stone weighing approximately 4 pounds, the kind of rock you'd find in a riverbed, not typically lying around on a forest floor, which raises an immediate question: where did it come from? Wildlife doesn't carry rocks. Bears don't throw objects. The presence of that specific type of stone in that location suggests it was brought there deliberately, but more concerning is the throwing mechanics required to cause the injury Phil sustained. A biomechanics expert consulted by the production estimated that to throw a 4-pound rock with enough force to cause that level of injury from a distance of approximately 40-50 feet requires strength beyond normal human capability. The throwing motion would also need to be coordinated and aimed, not a random toss. Rock throwing is actually well documented in Bigfoot encounter reports. It's considered a signature behavior, territorial warning behavior reported consistently across different geographic regions and different time periods. Researchers theorize it serves as a way to establish dominance and warn intruders without direct physical confrontation. The fact that Phil was injured by a thrown rock fits perfectly into established Bigfoot behavioral patterns. Phil's medical records document the injury, but the official incident report filed with Discovery Channel is deliberately vague about the cause. It states he was struck by a falling object during nighttime investigation in rough terrain. No mention of the rock being thrown, no reference to the encounter, just carefully worded language designed to minimize liability while technically being truthful. Phil himself has been completely silent about the incident. He hasn't posted on social media about Expedition X since it happened. When reached by fans asking about the injury, his responses have been vague. Accident during filming, recovering well, thanks for the concern. The kind of responses that say nothing while appearing to say something. But sources close to Phil say he's struggling with what happened. Not just physically, the concussion symptoms resolved within a week, but psychologically. Phil is a scientist. He's an entomologist and biologist who approaches investigations with academic rigor, having an experience that defies his scientific understanding of what's possible in North American wilderness has been profoundly disorienting. The injury serves as physical proof that something happened. Medical records don't lie. A 4-pound river stone embedded in the bark of a tree doesn't appear by accident, and Phil's concussion isn't a psychological reaction or misperception. Something with significant strength threw a heavy object with enough accuracy and force to injure a human being. That's not folklore. That's documented fact. Phil Torres allegedly required immediate medical attention. According to claims, the rock that struck him left a laceration requiring 12 stitches and caused a concussion significant enough for overnight hospitalization. But reports suggest it's not the severity that's remarkable, it's the circumstances and the projectile itself. The rock was supposedly recovered from the scene. Sources describe it as a smooth river stone weighing approximately 4 pounds, the kind you'd find in a riverbed, not typically on a forest floor, which allegedly raises an immediate question: where did it come from? Wildlife doesn't carry rocks. Bears don't throw objects. But according to rumors, what's more concerning is the throwing mechanics required. A biomechanics expert allegedly consulted by production estimated that throwing a 4-pound rock with enough force to cause Phil's injury from 40-50 feet requires strength beyond normal human capability. The throw would also need to be coordinated and aimed, not random. Rock throwing is actually well documented in Bigfoot encounter reports, researchers note. It's considered signature territorial behavior reported consistently across different regions and time periods. If true, the fact that Phil was injured by a thrown rock fits perfectly into established Bigfoot behavioral patterns that have been claimed for decades. Phil's alleged medical records document the injury, but sources claim the official incident report filed with Discovery is deliberately vague. It supposedly states he was struck by a falling object during nighttime investigation in rough terrain. No mention of throwing, no reference to any encounter, just carefully worded language designed to minimize liability. According to circulating reports, the rescue team that responded consisted of Jessica Chobot, 3 camera operators, 2 producers, and the production coordinator. 8 people total, and rumors suggest every single one of them allegedly saw something during the extraction. As they supposedly approached Josh and Phil's location, claims suggest they began hearing vocalizations, not the single scream from the initial encounter, but ongoing calls that seemed to come from multiple directions. Sources describe it as if they were being tracked by more than one individual, coordinating movements around them. Jessica, allegedly leading the group, reportedly made the decision to keep everyone together in tight formation. They moved as a unit, lights sweeping the forest, and according to claims, multiple cameras captured heat signatures on thermal, not just one, at least 3 distinct figures visible at various points during the hike. When they supposedly reached Josh and Phil, thermal cameras allegedly showed something disturbing. The signatures that had been tracking the rescue party had converged on their position. They were surrounded, according to reports, not closely but in a clear pattern around their location. The production coordinator allegedly made an immediate decision: extract and evacuate. No investigating. They helped Phil up and started back, and claims suggest those thermal signatures paced them the entire way back, maintaining distance but clearly following. Multiple crew members allegedly reported seeing eyeshine, eyes catching light at distances and heights that suggested something large. Not deer, not bears, something else watching them leave, if these accounts are to be believed. One camera operator, supposedly speaking anonymously, described it as the most frightening experience in 15 years of filming. Not individual moments, but the totality, the coordinated behavior, the persistent following, the sense that they were being allowed to leave rather than escape. Josh Gates has been remarkably quiet about his specific reasons for leaving Expedition X. His official statement was brief: "After much consideration, I've decided to step away from Expedition X to focus on other projects and spend more time with my family." Standard departure language that reveals nothing. But according to rumors, people close to Josh tell a different story. The alleged Washington State incident supposedly shook him in ways previous close calls never did. Reports suggest he keeps asking, what if Phil had been killed? The rock that allegedly struck him could have hit differently, could have caused a fatal injury. And Josh has 2 young children at home, a wife who reportedly worries every time he goes on expedition. Claims suggest there's also a philosophical component. If Bigfoot exists, these rumors say, it's not just an exciting discovery, it's potentially a predator, a territorial animal with capabilities that make it genuinely dangerous. And sources allege Josh realized that chasing that mystery isn't adventure anymore. It's risk he's supposedly no longer willing to take. According to these unconfirmed reports, Josh isn't retiring from television or exploration. He's allegedly still hosting Expedition Unknown, which focuses on historical mysteries and archaeological investigations. But claims suggest he's done with active paranormal investigation that involves going into remote areas looking for creatures that might pose serious threats. If these rumors are accurate, Discovery Channel allegedly finds itself in an unprecedented situation. They supposedly have footage that would generate massive ratings, clear documentation of a Bigfoot encounter involving their most recognizable host. From a business perspective, airing this would allegedly be a ratings goldmine, but according to claims, they also have a serious liability problem. One crew member was allegedly injured seriously enough to require hospitalization. If they air footage explicitly confirming their crew was attacked by an unknown creature, sources suggest they open themselves to questions about duty of care and safety protocols. Insurance is supposedly another consideration. Production insurance for adventure shows already comes with significant premiums. If insurers allegedly determine Discovery knowingly sent crews into dangerous situations, it could affect coverage not just for Expedition X, but for their entire slate of adventure programs, according to industry observers. Then there's allegedly the question of responsibility. If Discovery airs footage they believe genuinely documents a Bigfoot encounter, they're essentially taking a position that Bigfoot exists. According to speculation, that carries implications beyond ratings, potentially triggering scientific investigation or government inquiries. Sources claim the network has been in discussions with wildlife experts, legal counsel, and possibly even government agencies. Some executives allegedly push to air it, while others advocate for keeping it archived. A compromise position supposedly being discussed involves releasing heavily edited footage with extensive disclaimers. But Josh's decision to quit allegedly complicates everything. If Discovery airs the episode after Josh left citing safety concerns, it creates a narrative that the network prioritized ratings over host safety, according to media analysts. Josh's departure supposedly gives him leverage in how this footage might be presented. The current status, according to rumors, is that Discovery has delayed the entire season. The official explanation is production schedule adjustments, but speculation suggests they're buying time to figure out how to handle this alleged episode and what it means for the show's future. As of now, If this footage exists, it allegedly remains in Discovery's possession, unaired and inaccessible. According to claims, multiple parties have requested access. Bigfoot researchers have supposedly offered to sign NDAs. Scientists have allegedly expressed interest in analyzing the thermal imaging. Even government wildlife agencies have reportedly inquired. Discovery has allegedly refused all requests. The official position, according to sources, is that any footage is part of ongoing production. But rumors suggest the network simply hasn't decided what to do with it. Legal counsel is supposedly advising caution while executives weigh risks and benefits. Some researchers allegedly argue Discovery has a moral obligation to release footage this significant if it exists and is as compelling as claimed. Keeping it suppressed would prioritize corporate liability over potential scientific advancement. But the counter-argument is that Discovery owns any footage and has every right to make business decisions about release. There's also supposedly the question of physical evidence. The rocks allegedly thrown were reportedly collected. Phil's medical records supposedly document injuries from a thrown object. Crew members allegedly provided statement. All of this evidence would exist independent of video footage, but without Discovery releasing it to researchers, it remains isolated and unverifiable, according to claim. Leaks are theoretically possible. If the footage exists on multiple hard drives and has been viewed by numerous people, someone could potentially release it anonymously, though doing so would likely end their career and could expose them to legal consequences. But speculation suggests the temptation must be significant for people who believe this could change how science views Bigfoot. The most likely outcome, according to industry observers, is that Discovery will eventually air a heavily edited version. They'd allegedly include enough to acknowledge something happened while carefully editing around the most explicit sequences. Expert analysts would provide alternative explanations. Disclaimers would emphasize the unusual nature of the incident. Let's be absolutely clear about what we know for certain. Josh Gates has left Expedition X. That's confirmed. Phil Torres was allegedly injured during filming. That appears to be true based on his absence from social media and project schedules. Discovery has delayed the season. Also confirmed. Everything else, the details of the encounter, the footage descriptions, the crew reactions, remains unverified rumor and speculation. But rumors this consistent from multiple alleged sources suggest something significant happened. Whether it was exactly as described, we can't say. Whether footage as compelling as claimed actually exists, we don't know. But Josh's departure from a successful show speaks volumes. People don't walk away from careers like his without serious reasons. If even half of these rumors prove true, it represents a fundamental shift in paranormal investigation, from entertainment to genuine risk, from mystery to potential danger. The footage may eventually air, the full story may eventually be told, or this may remain one of television's most intriguing unsolved mysteries, whispered about but never fully confirmed. For now, we're left with questions. What really happened in those Washington woods? What did the cameras actually capture? And why did Josh Gates, one of television's most fearless explorers, decide some mysteries aren't worth solving? Until Discovery releases official information or Josh breaks his silence, we can only piece together the rumors and wonder what truth they might contain. Sometimes the most compelling evidence is what people choose not to show you.
Uncut tunnel footage revealed a shadow moving deep inside a passage, thought to be sealed, and the shape turned toward the light as if aware before fading into the stone. And now investigators fear the rumor Josh Gates followed for years may be real, so stay here and subscribe before the footage is buried again. The chamber responded with a soft, rising tremor, as if something ancient beneath the passage stirred at the sight, and the moment hinted at a truth investigators feared now shone. The team returned to the canyon entrance with attention that clung to every step, each investigator aware that the uncut tunnel footage had changed the mission entirely. What was once a simple documentation run had shifted into something far more unsettling, because the shadow captured on camera was not a trick of light nor a drifting blur from dust or debris. It moved with intention. It turned toward the lens, and it vanished into stone in a way that defied every natural law the crew trusted to keep them safe underground. The chamber air hung heavy with the smell of damp earth and old mineral dust, but beneath it lurked a colder undercurrent, a faint metallic taste that some explorers describe seconds before faint electromagnetic disturbances begin. Equipment readings jittered as the crew crossed the threshold, the handheld sensors flickering with unstable spikes that rose and flattened in irregular patterns, as if responding to their presence rather rather than the environment. Josh Gates had followed stories like this for years. Stories of tunnels that seemed to breathe, passages where sound warps and shadows stretch in ways no human movement can explain. And tonight, those rumors pressed into reality with an uncomfortable closeness. The deeper they walked, the stronger the hum became, a low vibration pushing through the soles of their boots and climbing into their legs like a slow current searching for an anchor. The tunnel walls seemed to ripple in the beam of the flashlight, not physically shifting, but bending light in thin, wavering sheets that reacted whenever the crew spoke or moved. A decade of whispered theories suddenly felt less like exaggerations and more like buried warnings left behind by those who had come here before. And somewhere ahead, beyond the curve of the passage, the camera had recorded the moment the shadow paused as if listening to the team. Now the crew approached that same spot, with every nerve drawn tight, knowing that if the footage was authentic, something within this tunnel had been waiting for them long before the lights were turned on. The crew slowed as they reached the bend in the tunnel, the place where the footage first captured the impossible movement. A brief frame of distortion sliding across the stone as though the wall itself had shifted to let something pass. The flashlight beams quivered against uneven rock, yet the surface ahead remained unnervingly smooth, worn not by water or time, but by something that had moved through it with silent precision. Rumors had long whispered of an older network beneath this canyon, a lattice of passages carved by unknown hands or forces, tunnels that investigators claimed to hear breathing when left alone in the dark. The idea was always dismissed as folklore, but tonight the air carried a faint rhythmic pulse, subtle enough to mistake for imagination, until the vibration crawled along the floor and brushed against their boots in a slow, deliberate sweep. The equipment operator raised a thermal camera toward the wall, expecting nothing more than cold stone. Yet the screen flickered with a thin vertical streak of heat, as if some presence had pressed against the rock only moments before. No animal could move like that. No person could slip through stone with such fluid motion. And yet the evidence glowed in front of them, a signature that refused to fade. Someone whispered that the shadow in the footage had turned its head, but no one wanted to admit they had seen the same unsettling angle in the replay. The deeper theory suggested that whatever lived in these tunnels did not travel by walking, but by slipping between layers of the earth itself, moving through fractures and voids that scanners failed to detect. The hum grew stronger, echoing through the chamber in low waves that touched their ribs and tightened the air around their throats. The ground shifted underfoot, not in a collapse, but in a controlled settling, as though the tunnel adjusted its posture in response to the team. And for the first time, every investigator felt it. The sense that they were no longer documenting a mystery but disturbing one, and that the thing captured in the uncut footage was not retreating. It was approaching. A cold drift of air slid through the tunnel as the crew advanced, though no one could find the source. Underground chambers rarely breathe, yet this one exhaled in slow, deliberate intervals, each pulse rolling across the dust in faint spirals that curled around their boots before dissolving into the dark. The team exchanged silent looks, each knowing the behavior aligned disturbingly well with older rumors collected from miners and explorers who claimed the canyon's subsurface felt alive, shifting in ways no natural formation should. Josh Gates had heard those stories for years, accounts of shadows moving against the grain of light, of narrow passageways that changed shape between one visit and the next. But he had never seen a case where the evidence pressed so close to confirmation. The thermal streak lingering on the wall behind them refused to cool, and its heat signature seemed to stretch downward, as if drawn by some unseen passage burrowed beneath the floor. The camera operator lifted his lens again, catching a faint shimmer low to the ground, a distortion that flickered like heat rising from asphalt despite the heavy chill filling the tunnel. Then the hum shifted. What had been a broad vibration dissolved into a thin, oscillating tone that pulsed through the chamber in measured intervals, a pattern that mimicked the rhythm captured captured in the uncut footage, just before the shadow appeared. The moment the tone stabilized, the dust near the far wall rippled, lifting in a gentle arc as though something on the other side were pressing outward. The crew froze, lights steady, breath held, watching as the stone surface seemed to flex in a subtle inward pull. It was not enough to call movement, but enough to strip any comfort of coincidence. One investigator whispered that it felt like the tunnel was listening. Another insisted they should retreat before the pressure grew stronger. But the path ahead remained open, the darkness drawing them forward, and the possibility that the footage had captured a real entity, one that lived within the fractures of this canyon, pulled them deeper into the unknown. The tunnel narrowed as the crew pushed deeper, the walls closing in with a quiet pressure that felt less like geology and more like intention, as though the stone were adjusting around them in slow, measured breaths. Their lights skimmed across mineral veins and pockets of fractured rock, yet every few feet the texture changed abruptly, smoothed into unnatural curves as if something had passed through recently and reshaped the surface in silence. These formations matched the descriptions found in old field notes and archived rumors, reports of subterranean corridors that seemed carved not by tools or erosion, but by movement itself, as though some presence traveled through the earth by folding around it rather than cutting into it. Josh Gates had always treated such claims with healthy skepticism, but tonight the tunnel carried a strange coherence, the hum rising in a controlled oscillation that felt purposeful. The equipment in the rear of the group responded instantly. Electromagnetic readings surged in sweeping arcs, while the ground sensor captured faint tremors that pulsed with a rhythm too steady to be random. When the team rounded another bend, the tone deepened into a low, resonant thrum that vibrated through their chests and crawled along their arms, a sensation far stronger than any natural acoustic reflection. Then, the distortion appeared again. A faint vertical shimmer stood several feet ahead, hovering just above the ground like a curtain of bending air. It was taller than before, its outline sharper, its movement synchronized perfectly with the rhythm shaking the tunnel. The shimmer tilted, not in a chaotic flicker, but in a controlled lean, as if its attention shifted toward the advancing lights. One of the investigators lifted a camera, the beam of the spotlight cutting through the distortion for a single shivering moment before the shape recoiled deeper into the darkness. The dust at their feet rose in a soft circular ripple, tightening inward before settling as though recording the retreat of whatever had been standing there. And for the first time that night, the crew sensed they were no longer following a trail of old rumors. They were walking directly into the territory of something that might not want them there. The crew hesitated at the point where the distortion had withdrawn, not because the way ahead was blocked, but because the tunnel beyond seemed subtly altered, as though the passage had stretched. In the seconds their lights were fixed on the shimmering outline, the air grew colder, settling on their skin in an almost electric stillness, and the hum that had filled the chamber fractured into two overlapping tones, one low and steady, the other thin and wavering, like a signal shifting between frequencies. Investigators familiar with underground acoustics whispered that such behavior had been reported before in these canyons, always tied to stories of unseen chambers that resonated with strange internal pressure. But tonight, the sound felt too focused to dismiss as a geological quirk. The dust ahead lifted again, swirling into a narrow column that twisted once before falling still, leaving the sense that something had just moved without making a sound. Josh Gates had catalogued countless claims from explorers who insisted the tunnels possessed their own kind of awareness, a subtle reaction to movement or breath, but even he had never encountered a case where the environment itself seemed to anticipate every step. The cameras continued recording as the investigators pressed forward, their lights cutting through a corridor that grew smoother and more uniform with each passing yard, as if shaped by something that preferred precision over chaos. Then, the tone deepened once more, and the far wall flexed with a soft inward pull, not enough to warp the rock, but enough to suggest pressure from the other side. One of the crew members raised a hand for silence, pointing to a thin seam running horizontally along the floor, a feature not present on earlier scans, and one that resembled the edge of a chamber door more than a natural crack. No one dared approach it, yet the closer they looked, the more the seam seemed to pulse with faint internal light, a glow that brightened with each oscillation of the hum. And in that moment, the team realized the uncut footage might not have captured a passing shadow at all, but the first glimpse of an entrance long rumored to exist, a threshold not meant to be found, and perhaps never meant to be crossed. The seam along the tunnel floor seemed to pulse faster as the crew drew closer, each faint flicker of light rising through the crack like a heartbeat buried beneath layers of ancient stone. No one could confirm whether it was geological fluorescence or something far more engineered, yet the glow moved with too much rhythm to dismiss as a natural trick of minerals. The hum shifted again, dropping into a heavy resonant throb that pressed against their ribs and settled into the air like a warning. Investigators exchanged uneasy glances, recalling the long-standing theory whispered among canyon researchers that some of these underground anomalies behaved less like empty passages and more like controlled systems, structures capable of sensing vibrations and responding through pressure waves. Josh Gates had encountered dozens of claims pointing to such phenomena, but the living quality of this seam surpassed anything recorded in his archives. As the crew steadied their lights, the dust at their feet lifted into narrow spirals that drifted toward the glowing line, pulled as though by a subtle gravitational thread. The rock surrounding the seam began to warm under their touch, a slow, spreading heat that contradicted the cold breath exhaling from deeper within the tunnel. One investigator knelt beside the crack, noting how the stone tapered into unnaturally smooth edges, as if carved from beneath by something that moved with fluid precision. The hum thickened into layered tones, each rising and falling in perfect sync with the glow, forming a pattern too clean to be random. Then the ground shifted, not in a collapse or tremor, but in a deliberate settling motion that pushed a soft wave of pressure through the chamber and forced everyone to brace themselves against the walls. The seam widened by a fraction of an inch, exposing a darker void beneath, and the glow intensified into a faint vertical shimmer that rose from the gap like the beginning of a threshold forming. A theory flickered through the team, one whispered by explorers who believed the tunnels were not static at all but responsive, opening and closing according to triggers no one had yet understood. And as the chamber tightened around them, the investigators realized they may have activated one of those triggers, calling forth something the canyon had kept sealed for decades. A cold draft poured from the widening seam, drifting across the tunnel floor in a low, creeping sweep that moved with too much intention to be mistaken for displaced air. The crew stepped back instinctively, raising their lights as the glow beneath the stone brightened into a thin vertical strand that climbed upward in slow, measured pulses, almost as if something beneath the passage were attempting to lift the door from within. The hum deepened again, settling into a layered vibration that pressed against their chests and curled around their arms like a living current, mapping every contour it touched. Rumors from past expeditions spoke of hidden chambers that responded to sound, structures that opened only when exposed to certain tones or environmental shifts. But no one expected to witness behavior that matched those theories so precisely. Josh Gates had heard countless variations of these claims, stories of explorers who felt watched underground, of chambers that seemed to inhale and exhale. But this moment eclipsed all of them. The seam expanded another fraction as the rock surrounding it flexed inward with a slow, mechanical grace, revealing a deeper darkness below, a void that swallowed their light with unsettling ease. An investigator extended a probe toward the gap, only to watch the beam of the device bend slightly as it neared the opening, the light distorting in a thin, shimmering arc that suggested an electromagnetic field, or something equally unknown. The The dust around the seam rose again, circling upward in a soft spiral that tightened as if drawn toward an unseen center point. The hum shifted into a narrow oscillation that repeated in precise intervals, a signal pattern too deliberate to dismiss as random resonance. The deeper theory, the one discussed only in private labs and late-night conversations, claimed that if tunnels existed beneath this canyon, they were not remnants of geology, but remnants of design, an infrastructure built by something that moved differently than any living species known to science. As the lights flickered and the chamber squeezed into another long exhale, the crew realized they were no longer observing a passive anomaly. They were standing at the threshold of a system responding to their presence, and whatever stirred beneath the seam was no longer waiting for them to act. It was preparing to rise. The seam widened with a slow, grinding sigh as the tunnel floor shifted in a precise, deliberate motion, the kind of controlled movement no natural fault line could replicate. The glow rising from the gap flickered in tight, rhythmic pulses, illuminating the swirling dust that drifted downward as though answering a silent summons. The hum fractured into two distinct tones again, one low and steady, the other thin and trembling, and together they formed a vibration that crawled across the stone walls in rippling waves. The crew stared as their equipment spiked in sharp vertical lines, registering electromagnetic distortion at levels far beyond the shallow anomalies they had recorded earlier. One investigator whispered the oldest theory tied to this canyon, a claim suggesting the tunnels were not built but grown, shaped by forces beneath the earth that left behind smooth corridors and seamless thresholds. Josh Gates had dismissed that idea more than once, but here the stone seemed to move with a biological patience, expanding the seam inch by inch, as if responding to a signal he could not hear. When the gap reached a width wide enough to peer through, the lights were raised, revealing a narrow descending shaft lined with impossibly smooth surfaces, each one curving downward in spirals that looked more engineered than carved. The dust inside the shaft did not fall. It drifted sideways, drawn into the darkness by an unseen current that defied the still air surrounding them. The hum shifted deeper, resonating so strongly it vibrated through the crew's boots and pressed into their legs like a rising internal pressure. The shimmering distortion appeared again within the shaft itself, its outline collapsing and reforming in fluid ripples that stretched toward the opening in slow, tentative gestures. And with each movement, the shaft brightened with a faint silver glow, revealing markings along the inner walls, patterns that looked less like symbols and more like the natural geometry of something grown rather than constructed. The crew stepped back, realizing that the rumored tunnel network might not be metaphor or exaggeration after all. It might be alive in ways they had never considered and awakening in ways they were not prepared to witness. The glow inside the shaft intensified until the spiraling walls shimmered with a pale metallic sheen, revealing movement far below, a slow drifting shadow rising through the column like a figure ascending through water. The crew froze, their lights trembling against the edge of the opening as the hum narrowed into a single focused tone that vibrated through their teeth and tightened the air around their lungs. Dust lifted in thin vertical strands, pulled toward the shaft as if the darkness were drawing breath, and the temperature dropped with a sudden bite that prickled across their arms. The shadow rose higher, its outline wavering in fluid collapses that hinted at shape without revealing it, and with every inch gained the pressure in the tunnel thickened until the stone around them seemed to flex in subtle, rhythmic pulses. Someone whispered that the entity was responding to the light. Another insisted it was reacting to the sound, but everyone agreed on the one truth forming with unbearable clarity. The footage had not captured a fleeting anomaly, but a documented interaction, the first undeniable moment where the underground network had answered back. The hum peaked in a sharp oscillation, forcing the crew to step away from the seam as the shadow reached the upper curve of the shaft, hovering just beyond the boundary between the darkness below and the fractured beam of their flashlights. lights. For several long seconds, the shape tilted as if studying them, the air bending in thin ripples around its form, and then the tone collapsed into silence so sudden it felt like the tunnel itself had exhaled. The glow dimmed, the pressure ebbed, and the shadow slipped downward in a smooth retreat that vanished into the spiraling depths as if it had never surfaced at all. The seam began to close, the stone folding inward with slow, deliberate strokes until the gap sealed with a final low thrum that echoed through the chamber like a warning swallowed by the earth. When the lights steadied and the hum faded to memory, the crew understood what the uncut footage truly confirmed. The rumors were not exaggerations. The theories were not mistakes. Something intelligent moved beneath these tunnels, something that had waited for years for an observer who could finally see it. And tonight, Expedition X had crossed its path. Just moments ago, Josh Gates finally confirmed what Expedition X viewers have suspected all along. There was footage captured during one investigation that the network refused to air, and it wasn't because of technical issue. According to Gates, what the team recorded that night was so disturbing that executives ordered the raw files locked immediately, and several crew members required medical attention afterward. A producer allegedly never returned to the field. What Josh just revealed explains why that episode will never be seen by the public. Make sure to subscribe if you want the full story as it unfolds. It was billed as a standard mid-season investigation, remote location, sparse documentation, and just enough local folklore to warrant a risk assessment. The Expedition X team was dispatched to an abandoned weather relay station originally decommissioned in the early 1990s, following a string of unexplained signal anomalies. Phil Torres and Jessica Chobot were accompanied by 2 additional camera techs and a single remote operator stationed half a mile away to monitor telemetry. According to internal production notes, they were only scheduled to be on site for 4 hours. The first hour ran smoothly. Field readings were normal, atmospheric pressure stable, battery levels well within range. Then, 79 minutes in, every piece of equipment registered a simultaneous frequency spike, followed by a complete blackout in the area surrounding the station. Not a malfunction, but a controlled interference, triggering only when Phil stepped into what was later marked Zone Delta. Crew accounts describe an immediate drop in air density, as if something displaced the oxygen itself. Jessica reported hearing static as though her headset was picking up a voice trying to form words. Phil described it differently. Not interference, but intention. He said it felt like something was aware of their presence and adjusting to their observation. The ambient temperature log recorded a 5-degree fall within 13 seconds, which normally would indicate a weather shift. But wind detectors showed no airflow. Multiple cameras began recording compression artifacts shaped like silhouettes, even though no movement was visible to the naked eye. At 1 hour, 42 minutes in, one of the technicians collapsed, reporting sharp chest pressure and blurred vision. His vitals spiked, and he was pulled outside immediately. But even after extraction, his microphone still registered the same low, rhythmic distortion, exactly in sync with his heartbeat. What happened next led the network to place a hard stop on even reviewing the rest of the footage, and the next 12 minutes are what forced Expedition X into silence, until Josh Gates broke it today. What followed in the aftermath of the technician collapsing would later be described in an internal incident report as a non-standard medical emergency under unidentified environmental influence. Jessica and Phil dragged him beyond the perimeter while radioing the remote operator for immediate extraction. But before transport could be arranged, every headset and monitoring channel emitted an identical 2-second audio burst that none of them had heard before, almost like a distorted breath overlaid with a single, indecipherable word spoken backwards. When slowed down afterward during medical review, the waveform formed a perfect rhythmic pattern matching the subject's respiratory cycle. He regained consciousness moments later, but claimed he hadn't passed out, only stepped outside of his body. Psychological protocol required instant suspension from further filming. As standard safety measures kicked in, the team was ordered to return to base camp. Yet removing the equipment did little to stop what they were experiencing. Even outside Zone Delta, battery drains continued at accelerated rates, as if something was attached to the devices themselves, not the surroundings. Live uplink verification failed 3 consecutive attempts. The remote operator, who remained physically removed from the event, reported through a restricted channel that his screen showed camera feeds trying to adjust for a non-existent focal point. His exact words were logged, like it was tracking something that wasn't in front of them, almost behind. That note triggered the next step. Network HQ, already receiving fragmented telemetry data, intervened. Over a secure channel, production was ordered to execute what's officially known as a Phase 7 reset, meaning equipment shutoff, immediate departure, and containment protocol enacted without post-investigation discussion. Only used 5 times in network history, it's reserved for extreme risk scenarios. The moment this order was given, the generators powering the relay station failed completely, not due to damage, but because the breaker flipped itself, despite being physically padlocked. The final recorded image before black screen? A blurred figure appearing between Phil and the technician, visible only on one camera angle. That frame was the last thing reviewed before access to the footage was sealed. The next 24 hours would determine whether Expedition X would even return to production. By the time the team arrived back at the staging area, the incident had already reached senior production executives. Initial assessments categorized the event as equipment and personnel compromise under unknown influence. Standard protocol dictated that footage be cataloged and forwarded for technical analysis. But before that process began, Josh Gates personally intervened, reportedly dialing into the emergency debrief via secure uplink just 31 minutes after the team returned. Though he wasn't physically on location, his role as lead executive producer granted him override authorization. What he heard during that debrief changed the entire approach. Jessica, still visibly shaken, described the moment the blackout occurred as if something reacted to us noticing it. She emphasized it wasn't merely environmental, but responsive, like the area itself shifted once the team acknowledged what they had detected. Phil echoed this sentiment but stated it differently. According to debrief transcripts, he said, "We weren't just documenting something unknown. We were seen, and it didn't want to be filmed." The technician who collapsed remained mostly silent, but when asked what he experienced, he reportedly whispered, "It doesn't want to stay where it is." His statement caused the call to go silent. Gates immediately requested raw file access to personally evaluate the telemetry sync and thermal imaging data before network review. That request was approved, but only under executive privacy restrictions, meaning only he and 2 senior analysts at headquarters could see it. Within hours, Gates confirmed privately that the footage captured sustained spatial compression inconsistent with known phenomena, implying intentional movement within the field of vision. Insiders say he told network leadership, "What's on that feed suggests more than activity. It suggests awareness." But instead of escalating to promotional material, Josh made a decision that surprised even executive staff. He demanded the footage be restricted from post-production entirely until external consultation could be arranged, refusing to allow even internal editors access. This marked the first time in Expedition X history where the lead host initiated content lockdown against network recommendation. That move triggered a series of legal evaluations that would ultimately determine the fate of the footage and of the episode. What Gates discovered in the raw thermal layer would make his next decision unavoidable. When Josh Gates accessed the restricted thermal and IR enhanced playback, he expected to find corrupted imaging caused by equipment stress or compression glitches. Instead, what he saw is what insiders now believe prompted the network to permanently seal the segment. At precisely the moment the technician collapsed, the thermal feed from camera 3 captured what appeared to be a human-shaped distortion, positioned several feet behind Phil Torres. But unlike typical heat signatures, it showed negative thermal feedback, meaning it absorbed infrared rather than emitting it. This anomaly remained still for 2 seconds, then shifted subtly toward the lens without registering surface heat, breathing patterns, or any identifiable form of locomotion. Yet on the raw spectral enhancement, the shape's internal structure briefly displayed pattern-like movements resembling pulse fluctuations. The timestamp aligned exactly with the technician's sudden chest pain. The strangest part wasn't the silhouette itself, but what happened in the following few frames. As the blackout wave rolled through the equipment, the figure appeared to pivot, its form reacting to Phil's flashlight beam, even though infrared detection shouldn't respond to visible light. According to project files, Josh replayed the sequence 14 times before noticing a chilling detail. On the metadata overlay, the anomaly carried an exact posture match and height ratio to a weather technician who disappeared at the same location in 1987, whose last known transmission mentioned signal distortions following him. The disappearance was never solved. Immediately after this realization, the remainder of the playback started showing cascading compression blocks that didn't behave like standard digital artifacts. Instead of random pixelation, they consistently formed in a curved arc pattern behind Jessica, almost mimicking a slow, deliberate reach. Analysts attempted to isolate individual frames and manually reconstruct data, but buffer overlays repeatedly replaced any image refinement with low-frequency tones similar to lab-recorded infrasound stress patterns. One frame, which only remained fully intact for a fraction of a second, showed the silhouette inches from the camera before the feed cut completely. The shape's head appeared turned directly toward the lens. No facial detail, no visible structure, just density displacement, like compressed air forming a rough human outline. Josh reportedly turned off the feed and stated it's aware of the camera. After reviewing the footage, he requested immediate cessation of all attempts to digitally enhance or stabilize it, citing risk to personnel if further exposure triggered physiological aftereffects. But by then, viewing the footage may have already resulted in deeper consequences than anyone expected. Following Josh Gates's private review of the footage, Network Compliance initiated what insiders refer to as a black vault submission. This process is typically reserved for legal disputes, internal misconduct, or content deemed potentially dangerous if aired without regulatory evaluation. But this wasn't standard risk management. The footage wasn't just locked away, it was categorized under a rarely used contractual clause known as Section 7.4c, non-broadcastable incident content, originally added to protect the network from liability in cases involving locations tied to active criminal investigation. Expedition X had never triggered it before. The clause permits immediate suppression of media that could incite hazardous imitation behavior, promote exploration of restricted areas, or cause psychological impact beyond normal entertainment parameters. That language was drafted for urban exploration scenarios and disaster sites, not paranormal investigation. Yet legal determined the footage qualified after reviewing transcript excerpts that reportedly described environmental reactions directly tied to the crew's presence. One internal assessment read, "Activity seems responsive. Risk of human replication if aired." In other words, if people saw it, they might try to go there. Network Legal also flagged the local government's historical records regarding the 1987 disappearance connected to the abandoned weather relay station. That case was never declared closed, which means, because the figure in the footage matched the missing technician's biometric outline, the broadcast could be interpreted as evidence in a potential ongoing investigation. Even though the events occurred decades ago, airing it could open legal complications, including demands for forensic analysis or allegations of interference with a possibly unsolved death. What sealed the footage permanently wasn't just fear of public reaction, it was a leaked production memo from the on-site medical specialist who treated the collapsed crew member. In her write-up, she stated, "Patient displays stress markers consistent with post-traumatic attunement. He believes the encounter might not be geographically bound." The phrase, "not geographically bound," was underlined by multiple attorneys. That line alone escalated the content from restricted protected to sealed indefinite. Josh argued that suppressing data went against the scientific integrity of the show, but legal countered with potential lawsuits, and worse, psychological fallout for viewers. After a tense meeting, Gates reportedly agreed not to push for release, saying only, "If this becomes entertainment, we've already lost control of it." What none of the executives knew at that moment was that another copy of the footage existed, one stored automatically on a field hard drive no one accounted for. And that's the file that resurfaced days later. Days after the footage was sealed, a back-end systems check flagged a secondary storage device, a rugged field hard drive that had been left in the mobile monitoring station during the shutdown. It had captured a full sync copy before the blackout. A junior post-production tech, unaware of the legal hold, accessed it while compiling camera logs. What he saw prompted him to immediately forward the data to the medical specialist who had treated the collapsed crew member. That led to the most alarming entry in the internal file chain, the psychological incident memo. The specialist noted that while his physical condition stabilized, the technician reported a persistent sensation of being watched from somewhere that isn't behind me, more like beneath. He stated he felt something still tracking his heartbeat, even hours after removal from the site, despite no biological abnormalities. Further testing showed his neural response spike whenever playback of the footage began, even when muted. He reportedly told her, "If you show that to anyone who isn't ready, it might follow them too." That line triggered immediate psychiatric evaluation. But the most disturbing element came from the junior tech's observation. In his incident report, he wrote, "I fast-forwarded through the final 30 seconds. The image distortion briefly shifts into the corner, like it sees the reflection of the monitor. Then, at the exact moment the technician wakes after collapsing, a noise comes through the audio track. But the gain settings were at 0. No microphone was on." Following this discovery, the tech requested reassignment and refused to work night hours. Within 48 hours, his report was integrated into the legal file, and the secondary drive was seized. That incident directly resulted in the file being classified at an even higher level, no longer under broadcast restriction, but under internal non-exposure protocol. And that's when Josh Gates was told something that changed his stance permanently. Someone else had already watched the file, alone, and what they reported next would shake even him. Before the secondary hard drive was confiscated, at least one individual managed to watch the final minutes alone, without supervision or biometric monitoring. That person was a mid-level producer assigned to verify damaged media files before they were formally archived. According to his unsigned internal statement, he viewed the footage late at night, believing it was simply corrupted audio-visual data. What happened during those minutes escalated the crisis beyond what Gates or network executives anticipated. He reported that while scrubbing through the footage frame by frame, the anomaly seemed to shift in behavior. Rather than remaining static as earlier versions showed, it gradually began tracking the camera's perspective, adjusting as though aware of his interaction with it. He claimed that at approximately 1:43:14 into the recording, the shape moved slightly closer each time he paused. Thinking it was playback lag, he checked latency. There was none. Then, in the last clean frame before auto-corruption began, the silhouette appeared directly aligned with the camera lens, positioned at eye level. He stated that although no face was visible, he felt acknowledged. What unsettled investigators was what happened afterward. System logs recorded a spike in room temperature despite no HVAC adjustments. He abruptly exited the server room, logged off without filing verification, and drove home without explaining to staff. When contacted the next morning, he claimed he had no memory of leaving work. His vehicle GPS showed he made an unscheduled stop at the investigation location's general vicinity over 3 hours away before returning home. He tendered his resignation the next day, citing irreversible exposure to subject matter beyond broadcast intent. His final note read, "We didn't expose it, it exposed us, and it knows the difference." Following this, external auditory forensic specialists were brought in against standard protocol. What they discovered inside the recording led to the most controversial decision in Expedition X history. The forensic specialists were asked to analyze the final retained audio signal, something the network hoped would help attribute the interference to an explainable anomaly. Instead, their report stated the waveform exhibited frequency structuring matching intentional rhythmic sequencing. Put plainly, it looked like something was responding to the monitoring equipment, forming signal patterns that, under slow playback, sounded eerily similar to controlled breathing. One analyst concluded that the reading was consistent with a presence attempting to regulate or sync with an external biological system. That system was later cross-referenced with the collapsed crew member's cardiac rhythm. When this was relayed to Josh Gates, he reportedly remained silent for nearly 10 seconds before responding. According to two sources familiar with the meeting, he finally said, "If this becomes televised entertainment, we're responsible for what comes next." That statement, more than the footage itself, led to the final decision: permanent suppression. The network declared the episode unrecoverable. Personnel involved were barred from public discussion, and the location was struck from production clearance lists. Earlier today, Josh Gates was asked about the infamous unaired episode during a live interview. Rather than repeating the standard technical failure explanation, he paused and said, "Some footage isn't meant to be broadcast because of what it does to the people who filmed it, and sometimes because of what it tries to do afterward." He didn't elaborate, but the panel fell silent. That was the first public acknowledgement that what was filmed had active impact. He ended the segment with, "We shut it down to protect the crew. Some things aren't scared to be found. They're waiting to be noticed." The interview cut to break immediately. No further questions were allowed.